Having lived her life over once more, Lillian finally understood the true weight behind the saying that the second male lead belongs to the female lead. So in this lifetime, the very first thing Lillian did was give up on conquering Albert and decisively cut off every possible connection with him. When he was drugged, Lillian sent the female lead to him, letting them entangle in passion together. When she was framed by the female lead, Lillian did not hesitate to go along with it. Also, she could turn around and leave immediately. Even at Albert and the female lead's engagement ceremony, Lillian held nothing back and offered her most sincere blessings. She would rather die than remain entangled with him in the slightest. Because in her previous life, Lillian had ignored the impropriety of their identities and foolishly loved Albert for her entire life. What she received in return, however, was a tragic death on an operating table. In this life, she had finally awakened completely. She only wished that in life and in death, they would never meet again. Chapter 1. Host. Are you sure you want to give up conquering the second male lead of this world, Albert? Once you give up, you will never be able to return to your original world. Moreover, the mission will be considered a failure, and all your memories of him will be permanently erased. Lillian responded absent-mindedly, murmuring, "Forgetting is fine too. If she forgot, it wouldn't hurt so much anymore, would it?" Thinking of how, in her previous life, Albert had forcibly cut the child out of her before full term just to save Olivia, Lillian's eyes unconsciously reddened. Seeing this, the system tried to persuade her. "Why don't you reconsider, host? After all, you've been conquering him for so many years already. The progress is more than halfway complete. And Albert's past kindness toward you wasn't fake. Maybe it's just that the appearance of the female lead recently drew his attention. If you hold on a little longer." In her previous life, Lillian had believed the system's words and couldn't let go of her feelings for Albert. So she stubbornly chose to continue the conquest. After all, the many years of affection between her and Albert weren't fake. But when Lillian confessed her feelings to him, Albert's expression changed completely. She still remembered clearly what Albert said at the time. "Lillian, aren't you disgusting? I'm your uncle." But they had already been just one step away from breaking through that final barrier. She could tell that Albert liked her too. From that moment on, their relationship plunged to rock bottom. Then, one time, Lillian was drugged at a banquet. She didn't know how it happened, but when she woke up the next day, she was actually with Albert. When Albert opened the door, it was surrounded by reporters. The news spread quickly, and not long after, Lillian discovered she was pregnant. With no other choice, Albert married her. Yet on the very day of their wedding, Olivia left behind a letter and went abroad, disappearing without a trace from then on. Albert never saw Lillian again. Whenever Lillian called him, Albert would coldly reply, "I've already married you as you wished, and Olivia has left. What more do you want?" Gradually, Lillian stopped expecting Albert to return and instead placed all her attention on the unborn baby. Until one day, when she woke up and found herself lying on an operating table, she felt something slowly being separated from her body. In the final second before losing consciousness, she heard the familiar voice of a man. "Has the umbilical cord blood been obtained?" Olivia's side is already prepared. The doctor replied with difficulty, "President Rodriguez, the umbilical cord blood has been obtained, but the baby died due to the forced cesarean section." When Lillian woke up again, she realized she had been reborn to the time right after she had confessed to Albert Rodriguez and their Cold War had just begun. Everything was still in time. Thinking this, Lillian steadied herself and said to the system, "I've made up my mind. I'm sorry. 007. You probably won't be able to complete your quota." Seeing this, the system said nothing more. Over the years, it had witnessed all of Lillian's efforts. It comforted her gently. "It's okay, host. I respect your decision. I'm still in the novice protection period anyway. Failing one mission doesn't matter. Don't feel guilty." Hearing this, Lillian finally felt relieved. She said sincerely to the system, "Thank you, 007. If it hadn't been for its companionship and encouragement over the years, she probably wouldn't have lasted this long." Although the ending of her previous life wasn't good, if she hadn't tried, she wouldn't have been able to give up. It was precisely because of this experience that she was finally able to completely let go of her feelings for Albert. The system said tearfully, "Thank you too, host. For not disliking me even though I didn't know anything at first. And for working so hard to help me meet my quota. But I have to go now, the main system just called me back. Host. Your memories of Albert will gradually fade during this period. In half a month, you will completely forget Albert. Goodbye. Host. Lillian raised her head and looked into the void, slowly saying, goodbye. 007. Lillian Wu wiped away the tears that had slipped out and sat there in a daze all night. When dawn came, her father called. Sweetheart, Dad's company is finally on track now. When are you planning to come and keep Dad company? After her mother passed away, Father Wu had shifted the group's focus overseas. At that time, he had no time to take care of Lillian, so he agreed to her request to stay in the country and entrusted Albert, the son he had taken in, to look after her. In the blink of an eye, 3 years had passed. During that time, Father Wu had mentioned countless times that he wanted Lillian to come back. But every single time, Lillian had refused without hesitation because of Albert. Now, Lillian Wu once again rejected Father Wu. Chapter 2. Dad. I can't go back just yet. I have something more important to do. I want to reactivate Mom's police badge and seek justice for her, and for those heroes. Thinking of the information she had secretly gathered from the last century, Lillian's gaze darkened. Father Wu remained silent for a long time. Just as Lillian, restless and uneasy, was about to speak again, he finally broke the silence. Sweetheart, as your father, I don't want you doing something so dangerous, but I also know this has always been the obsession you could never let go of. Ever since your mother passed away, I forced you to give up the chance to continue your studies at the police academy. Even the slightest disturbance made me panic. I was terrified you would end up like your mother. I owe you an apology, but you're the only one I have left. Sweetheart. Lillian's eyes reddened as she listened. She choked back a sob and said, Dad, I know. I really do. Father Wu steadied his emotions and continued, Sweetheart, you still don't know why I was so determined back then to move the Wu group overseas, do you? Lillian had asked him about it before. At the time, Father Wu hadn't answered. He had only looked deeply at her before leaving the country without hesitation. Before Lillian could respond, Father Wu went on to explain, because I knew you would never give this up, and I didn't want to relive that helpless feeling of watching your mother get into danger without being able to do anything, so I made up my mind to go abroad. Now, I have the ability to protect you, so go. Sweetheart, your father will always be your backing. After ending the call with Father Wu, Lillian dialed the number he had sent her. When Lillian arrived at the Nanchur Criminal Investigation Brigade, Sam was already waiting at the entrance. The moment he saw her, he froze for a second, coming back to his senses. He said to Lillian, You really look just like your mother, Comrade Lillian. Once you officially become an undercover anti-narcotics officer, the authorities will arrange a staged death to erase all traces of your civilian life. Please get your affairs in order during this time. We'll see you again in half a month. After leaving the police station and returning to the villa, Lillian encountered someone she hadn't expected to see. Albert said expressionlessly, There's a banquet at the Hua family's tonight. You're coming with me. Without a second thought, Lillian refused. In her previous life, it was precisely at this banquet that she had been set up and ended up involved with Albert. In this life, there was no way she would go again. Hearing her refusal, Albert's face darkened. He looked at her coldly. Lillian, I can pretend nothing happened a few days ago. You don't need to play these push and pull games anymore. Before Lillian could say anything else, Albert rubbed his temples, tossed out a final remark, and left. A secretary will come later to arrange your styling. Get yourself ready. Lillian didn't even have time to refuse before she found herself at the banquet hall. This time, she didn't touch a single thing there. Just as she thought she had gotten through the night safely, a waiter accidentally spilled wine all over her. When Lillian went to a guest room to change her clothes, a scorching hot chest suddenly pressed against her back. Instinctively, she drove an elbow backward, and a muffled groan sounded behind her. She turned around to see Albert staring at her with bloodshot eyes. Lillian, what are you pretending now? I thought you were just immature, unable to tell family affection from romantic feelings. I never imagined you'd be this shameless, to drug me. At that moment, Lillian finally understood why Albert had hated her so much in her previous life. All along, he had believed that she was the one who had drugged him. Once she realized this, Lillian didn't hesitate. She went straight downstairs to the banquet hall, found the female lead, Olivia, and briefly explained the situation. A flicker passed through Olivia's eyes before she hurriedly went to Albert's room. When she opened the door and Albert saw her, he froze in place. Seeing this, Olivia spoke up. "Uncle, whether you believe me or not, I didn't do this." She then closed the door behind her. Hearing the sounds coming from inside, Lillian thought she would feel heartbroken, but she didn't, and the gentle image of Albert from her memories had already grown indistinct, as if he were nothing more than a familiar stranger. Chapter 3. The next day, Lillian took her documents and went to cancel her household registration. As soon as she arrived, she ran straight into Albert. Seeing his swollen lips, Lillian couldn't quite bring herself to look and instinctively turned her gaze away. For some reason, this seemed to put Albert at ease. He warned her coldly, "Olivia will be moving in later. No matter what you're thinking, don't let Olivia find out. Do you understand? And don't ever do something as absurd as you did a few days ago again. Otherwise, you'll bear the consequences yourself." Hearing this, Lillian raised her head and looked straight at Albert, a trace of confusion in her eyes. Absurd things? She didn't understand what he meant, but she still nodded obediently. "All right, Uncle." Albert got the answer he wanted, yet felt even more uncomfortable. He couldn't help asking, "Didn't you say you don't like calling me uncle?" Lillian didn't remember whether she had ever said that, but she was already feeling impatient, so she snapped back sarcastically, "If I don't call you uncle, what should I call you, brother?" "Brother, can you move aside now?" Albert froze. The last time he had heard her call him brother was when they were children. Back then, he had just been taken in by the old master, and the first time Lillian saw him, she had sweetly called him brother. Looking at the faintly mocking expression on Lillian's face, Albert felt that something was quietly changing, and it made him uneasy. Just as he was about to continue lecturing her, his phone rang at the worst possible moment. Albert originally planned to hang up, but the instant he saw the name on the screen, he answered. His expression changed. Without another glance at Lillian, he grabbed his car keys and left. Lillian, meanwhile, finally made it to the service hall as she wished. After finishing all the procedures, she unexpectedly ran into Albert and Olivia there. Albert had Olivia wrapped in his arms in a protective posture, while Olivia leaned into the man's chest with reddened eyes. Olivia walked straight past Lillian without looking at her, but Albert suddenly reached out and grabbed Lillian by the wrist. His eyes looked as if they were about to spit fire as he stared at her and said word by word, "You followed me? I knew you wouldn't behave yourself. This morning you swore to me that you wouldn't cause any more trouble. And now what are you doing?" Lillian forcefully shook off Albert's grip and snapped back coldly. "What? Is this service hall owned by you, President Rodriguez? Only you're allowed to come, and no one else is?" Before Albert Rodriguez could say anything, Olivia choked out tearfully, "Lillian, I know you like your uncle, but my adoptive mother just passed away. And you..." Before she could finish speaking, Olivia was already crying too hard to continue. Albert immediately pulled Olivia into his arms, comforting her. Yet Lillian clearly caught the fleeting trace of smugness that flashed through Olivia's eyes. Olivia Bai was the Bai family's long-lost biological daughter who had just been found this year. It was said her adoptive parents hadn't treated her well, yet now she was acting like this. Hearing the commotion, people in the hall began to look over, whispering and pointing at Lillian. How can someone like her fall for her own uncle? Is she sick? Yeah, and she even followed him. How is that any different from a deranged fan? In an instant, a scene from her previous life flashed through Lillian's mind. Back then, she had stood just as miserably in a hall like this, being pointed at by everyone. Some people had even thrown cake at her, leaving her hair sticky and tangled. All because, in front of everyone at a banquet, the man had taken out the love letters Lillian had once written to him and read them out one by one, completely exposing her girlish feelings to the public. She had stood there helplessly while Albert watched coldly from the side as people hurled the most vicious insults at her. Slut, freak, shameless bitch. Lillian had stubbornly remained where she was, unable to understand why Albert would do such a thing to her. For a long time afterward, she hadn't dared to go out. Eventually, She developed severe depression. It was only the arrival of her child that finally pulled her back from the abyss. As Olivia looked at Lillian standing frozen in place, a thought suddenly formed in her mind. Feigning concern, Olivia stepped forward and grabbed Lillian's hand, snapped back to reality. Lillian instinctively struggled, but Olivia acted as if she had been shoved hard, suddenly falling to the ground. Lillian reached out to help her up, but Olivia's face turned pale as she clutched her stomach, tears streaming down as she looked at Albert. "Albert, my stomach hurts so much." Chapter 4. Albert shoved Lillian aside viciously, scooped Olivia up in his arms, and strode out. Before leaving, he turned back and shot Lillian a cold look. "You'd better pray that Olivia is fine. Otherwise, I'll teach you a lesson on behalf of your father." Lillian clutched her ankle and said nothing. The emotions that hadn't fully faded made her chest feel painfully tight. Once, when Lillian had accidentally fallen and sprained her ankle, Albert had been just as anxious as he was now, lifting her into his arms, rushing her to the hospital, and then taking meticulous care of her every day afterward, even cooking for her himself. But everything had long since changed beyond recognition. When Lillian returned from the hospital, she saw Albert waiting in the living room with a group of bodyguards, his expression colder than frost. As soon as he saw her, he gestured to those behind him, receiving the signal. The bodyguards immediately restrained Lillian. Albert slowly walked up to her, his eyes filled with red veins. "Originally, for the sake of you being a junior, I didn't want to make too much of this, but I never expected your thoughts to be so vicious. You knew Olivia was pregnant, yet you still pushed her. Do you know she had massive bleeding and almost died on the operating table?" Lillian stared at Albert in disbelief. Olivia was pregnant? They had only been together yesterday. How could she be pregnant? With that thought, Lillian asked out loud, "How could Olivia be pregnant? Who does the child belong to?" Hearing this only fueled Albert's rage. He grabbed Lillian by the chin. "You still have the nerve to ask? 2 months ago, wasn't it you who hired a group of street thugs to violate Olivia? I never knew you could be this dark and obsessive. How could someone as upright and honorable as your mother raise a degenerate like you?" When Olivia heard this, she suddenly lifted her head and stared fiercely at Albert. Albert knew exactly how to hurt Lillian, and he knew how devastating those words would be to her. But he was far too angry that Lillian, as a woman, could do something like this to another woman. With that thought, the last trace of guilt Albert felt toward Lillian vanished completely. He turned to the bodyguards and ordered coldly, "Break both her arms and lock her in the basement. Without my permission, no one is allowed to let her out." Seeing that they were getting serious, Lillian no longer bothered trying to explain and instinctively fought back. But facing a group of well-trained bodyguards, she was gradually overwhelmed. A sharp pain shot through her side. Lillian could no longer hold on and lost consciousness. When Lillian woke up again, she was already in the basement. Like a dead fish, she had been thrown onto the ground. Everything around her was pitch black, completely empty. Relying on her decent eyesight, Lillian spotted a bottle of mineral water not far away. She understood this was Albert's punishment. Just enough water to keep her from dying. She tried to move her body. The moment her arms shifted, waves of intense pain surged through her. Her ankle injury had also worsened because of the earlier struggle. Just as Lillian closed her eyes in despair, a startled voice echoed in her mind. "Host, what's wrong with you?" Lillian's eyes flew open, hope igniting in her heart. 007, why are you back? 007 didn't answer right away. Soon, a warm current spread through Lillian's body. Her dislocated arms were reset, and the swelling in her ankle gradually subsided. Only after finishing all this did the system respond to her question. When I returned to the main system to resume my post, it told me that the trajectory of this world had changed somewhat, so the main system sent me to investigate the cause. I originally didn't want to come back and disturb you, but I sensed an energy fluctuation from a being like myself on you. Chapter 5. After Lillian finished recounting everything that had happened during this period to 007, the system finally detected something abnormal. It cried out in shock. "How could it be here?" Lillian asked in confusion. "Who is it?" 007 hurriedly explained. "The energy fluctuation I sensed on you comes from a system of the same kind as me, one that defected from the main system. It was taken away by the main god for being too aggressive in carrying out missions and for instigating its host to commit illegal and criminal acts. When the main god attempted to destroy it, it escaped. I never expected it to hide here and even bind itself to the female lead of this world. No wonder this conquest mission should have been completed long ago. Yet kept failing, so it was all its doing. After explaining everything to Lillian, 007 rushed off in a hurry. Before leaving, it comforted her, saying, "Host, I'll be back in a moment. Don't be afraid on your own. I'll be quick." Lillian felt a surge of emotion for a moment. After the system left, she began to notice that something about Olivia didn't feel right. In her previous life, Olivia had never been pregnant, so had Olivia been bound to a system back then as well? And who exactly had drugged someone at the banquet that night? Why had she woken up in Albert's room the next morning? As these thoughts swirled in her mind, Lillian gradually fell asleep. When she woke up again, she realized she was lying on a bed, but not in her own room. Panic rose in her chest. Recalling what had happened in her previous life, Lillian lost control for a moment and shouted, "Is anyone there? Where am I?" A maid hurried in upon hearing her voice. "Miss, what's wrong?" Seeing the familiar face, Lillian finally relaxed a little. She asked weakly, "Sandra, why am I here?" Sandra's eyes darted around as she stammered. "Miss Olivia was discharged from the hospital today. Mr. Rodriguez said your room has a good location and better facilities, so he ordered us to move your things to the first-floor guest room. And he also said..." Lillian said nothing, simply staring quietly at Sandra. Under that gaze, Sandra felt her scalp go numb, as if everything had been seen through. She didn't hesitate anymore. "He also said that you're not to step onto the second floor again in the future. Otherwise you'll have to move out." Lillian closed her eyes briefly. She didn't make things difficult for Sandra and let her leave. Just as Lillian fell into deep thought, the door opened. Albert entered with a cold expression and stopped by her bed. When Lillian opened her eyes, she met Albert's dark, gloomy gaze. "This time, I originally planned to teach you a lesson by calling the police and letting you reflect in there for a while. But Olivia is kind-hearted and pleaded on your behalf. So I only punished you lightly, locked you up for a day and then let you out. If you still refuse to repent, don't blame me for being ruthless." Lillian let out a mocking laugh. So in his eyes, breaking both her arms only counted as a light punishment. "Then should I thank you both? Thank you for being so magnanimous and forgiving me?" Hearing this, Albert's expression softened slightly. He thought Lillian was genuinely expressing gratitude, so his tone eased. "I know you like me, but you shouldn't have hurt Olivia. I'll let this go for now. There won't be a next time. Oh, and Olivia will be coming back here soon to recuperate. Take good care of her and make up for your sins." As soon as he finished speaking, noisy voices sounded outside. Albert hurried out. Watching his anxious figure, Lillian slowly lay back down. Perhaps it was compensation from the system. Albert's memories, which had been gradually fading over the past few days, became clear again. But memories could return. Love could not. Under the system's repair, Lillian's body had almost fully recovered. After resting for a few days, she decided to go to the Martyrs' Cemetery to pay her respects. As soon as she stepped out of the room, she saw Olivia in the living room, picking out flowers. When Olivia saw her, she greeted her warmly. "Lillian, come help me arrange these flowers. See what else should be added." As she spoke, she pulled Lillian by the arm toward the vase. Lillian only wanted to visit her mother, so she casually picked up a few flowers and placed them in. "These, they look pretty good." After saying that, she freed her arm from Olivia's grip and took a taxi to the Martyrs' Cemetery. By the time Lillian finished wiping her mother's tombstone, it was already dark. When Olivia reluctantly returned to the villa, she was surprised to find the enormous house completely empty. She found it a little strange, but didn't think much of it and went back to her room. As Lillian drifted in and out of dreams, the light in the room suddenly snapped on. The blinding brightness left her dazed for a moment, unable to distinguish reality from illusion. Then the sharp pain that flared across her face instantly dragged her back to reality. Chapter 6. Before Lillian could even react, she was yanked off the bed. The icy floor sent a shiver through her body, and the ringing in her ears reminded her just how merciless that slap had been. A warm liquid flowed from her nose. Flustered, Lillian raised her hand to wipe it away. But the man didn't give her the chance. He forcefully hauled her up from the ground and struck her again. Smack! The crisp sound echoed as Albert finally spoke. Lillian, I was wondering why you'd been behaving yourself lately. Turns out you were brewing something nasty. Yesterday Olivia mentioned in the living room that she's allergic to lilies. And today you go out of your way to mix lilies into the flowers. You even bribed the servants to deliberately place that bouquet in Olivia's room. How can you be so vicious? Lillian let the blood continue to flow from her nose as she stubbornly lifted her head to look at Albert. I didn't deliberately put lilies in there. As for bribing servants, that's absurd. Ever since Olivia came, didn't you find excuses to send all the people my father left for me back to the old house? The villa had originally been full of people arranged by Father Wu for Lillian. Most of them had watched her grow up. After Olivia arrived, she noticed that all of them sided with Lillian. Whenever Olivia tried to subtly frame Lillian, they would chime in one after another to explain things for Lillian, and even mock Olivia in the process. Eventually, Olivia cried to Albert, "Brother Albert, those servants don't listen to me at all. I can't even get them to pour me a glass of water. They're all bullying me, and I don't know why." After hearing this, Albert replaced all the servants in the villa with people Olivia trusted. At least he still had a shred of conscience. He didn't fire them, only sent them back to the old house. Lillian paused, then continued, "And besides, what reason would I have to hurt her? She and I have no grudge against each other." Albert had already begun to waver. He knew Lillian had barely left her room these past few days and wouldn't even know that Olivia was allergic to lilies. Moreover, Lillian had aspired to become a police officer since childhood, and her character had always been upright. But when he heard her last sentence, Albert recalled what Olivia had once said to him. When girls fall for someone, they always end up doing irrational, crazy things. Thinking of this, Albert impatiently cut Lillian off. Furious, he dragged her into the study. He slammed a diary onto the floor at Lillian's feet, the one that recorded her girlish thoughts. Seeing that familiar diary, the blood in Lillian's veins froze instantly. In a moment of loss of composure, she picked it up and hugged it tightly to her chest. Seeing her reaction, Albert looked at her with open mockery. "This is the reason. If Olivia hadn't stumbled upon it while cleaning that day, I wouldn't have known you'd harbored such filthy thoughts about me so early on. You're disgusting." Lillian's voice, thick with nasal congestion, sounded. "You opened it." Her tone was flat, so calm it was frightening. Seeing the expression on Lillian's face, Albert felt a flicker of panic. He stiffly changed the subject. "Olivia's allergy triggered an asthma attack today. She almost ended up in the ICU. You're going to the hospital now to apologize to her." Chapter 7. I'm not going. Lillian's cold reply completely ignited Albert's anger. He lowered his voice, lacing it with threat, hoping she would obediently submit. "I'll say it one last time, are you going or not? If you don't, I hope you're prepared to bear the consequences." Lillian clutched the diary tightly to her chest, her fingers gripping it until her knuckles turned white. She heard the threat in Albert's tone and could already imagine the outcome of refusing. Albert's face darkened. Fine. Then today I'll discipline you properly on behalf of your brother." He strode to the wall and took down the ruler hanging there. Albert kicked Lillian hard in the knee. She lost control and dropped to one knee. And immediately afterward, a burning pain exploded across her back. This was the first time Albert had truly used the ruler on her. He had bought it during Lillian's rebellious phase, originally just to scare her. Whenever Lillian made a mistake in the past, Albert would put on a show of taking it out and pretending to hit her. But he had never once brought himself to strike. She never expected it would be used for real at a time like this. Lillian didn't know how many times Albert struck her. By the end, she could no longer hold on and collapsed onto the ground. In her hazy consciousness, she heard Albert instruct the bodyguards to send her to the old house. When Lillian woke up again, she saw a group of people gathered around her bed, looking at her with concern. The old butler saw her open her eyes and hurriedly pushed through the crowd, helping her sit up. "Miss, how are you feeling?" As he spoke, his eyes reddened. Some of the servants nearby even began to cry, complaining angrily about Albert. Back then, the old master never should have taken Albert in. He was fed and raised so well for so many years, only to turn into an ungrateful wolf. Exactly. The eldest young master begged him to take good care of our miss. And now, Just because of some pretentious coquette, he treats her like this. Looking at these people who genuinely cared about her, Lillian felt a warm ache in her heart. In the end, the ones who had always treated her well were still them. In her previous life, when her depression was at its worst, it had also been them, along with the system, who stayed by her side. Many of them should have retired long ago, but because they couldn't rest easy leaving her, they never did. Just as she recalled her past life, an electronic voice sounded in her mind. Host. Host. I'm back. Lillian kept her expression calm and spoke softly to the old butler, acting spoiled. Uncle Lee, I'm a little hungry. The old butler immediately called for people to prepare food. He wanted to leave a few servants to stay with Lillian, but she gently sent them all away. Only when the room was empty did Lillian finally speak to the system. 007. How does the main system plan to handle this? The system's voice carried a hint of excitement. The main god plans to personally come and destroy it. But since you've been bullied by it for so long, I suggested letting you decide when it should be destroyed. Then the system explained further. As long as the system bound to Olivia is destroyed, all the buffs on her will disappear. She will no longer be the female lead of this world, and her status and appearance will all revert to their original levels. Lillian caught the key point in its words. Status? Isn't Olivia Bai's status the Bai family's true daughter? If not, then what was her original identity? 007's tone instantly changed, the disgust in its voice practically overflowing. She's not the Bai family's true daughter at all. The Bai family never had any true or fake daughter to begin with. The original Bai family's eldest daughter was their biological child. Olivia only became the so-called true daughter because the system tampered with everything. Lillian was so shocked she couldn't speak for a moment, silently marveling at just how powerful that system's methods were. Suddenly, her phone chimed, pulling her thoughts back. Looking at the message on the screen, Lillian said to the system, "Then please tell the main system, 3 days from now." Chapter 8. After settling everything with the system, Lillian Wu sent a message to a certain number. 3 days from now. She then deleted the message. Lillian stayed home with Uncle Lee, Aunt Zhang, and the others for 2 days before having Father Wu arrange for them to move to the residence he had bought for her. Before leaving, they were still worried, turning back step by step. "Miss, leave a few people here with you, otherwise, we won't feel at ease." Lillian pretended to be annoyed. "The residence is so big, if you don't clean it properly, how am I supposed to move in?" Hearing that, the old butler finally left decisively. He needed to arrange for people to clean everything up as soon as possible so he could come back to pick up the miss. Just after seeing the old butler and the others off, a car drove through the gates of the old house. Seeing the familiar Maybach, Lillian paused on the stairs, then turned around and returned to the living room. After Albert carefully supported Olivia inside, he saw Lillian sitting quietly on the rosewood sofa in the living room. The sight of her made Albert feel momentarily dazed. In his memories, it seemed there had been many times when Lillian had sat here just like this, silently waiting for him. "Lily, didn't you receive the message I sent yesterday?" Before Lillian could answer, Olivia continued on her own. "I'm getting engaged to your uncle tomorrow. You must come." Seeing that Lillian still didn't respond, a flash of resentment passed through Olivia's eyes. She tugged at Albert's sleeve. "Albert, why isn't Lily responding to me?" Hearing Olivia's voice, Albert snapped back to his senses and looked coldly at Lillian. "Olivia is talking to you. Are you mute?" "Lillian, you'd better not cause any trouble tomorrow. Behave yourself and attend my engagement banquet with Olivia. Otherwise..." Lillian didn't argue. She nodded quietly. "Don't worry, Uncle. Not only will I go, I'll also prepare a grand gift for you both." For some reason, Olivia felt uneasy looking at Lillian like this. The system's voice sounded in her mind, soothing her. "It's fine, host. Once tomorrow's engagement ceremony is completed, Albert's affection value will be fully collected. Rest assured." Hearing the system's voice, Olivia calmed down, but looking at Lillian, irritation still welled up inside her. She hated that lofty, aloof demeanor of Lillian's the most. Olivia wanted to say more, but Albert was already preparing to leave. Unwillingly, Olivia shut her mouth. Back at the villa, Olivia accompanied Albert in the study to handle company matters. By chance, she saw Lillian's diary, and a plan formed in her mind. At the engagement venue, Albert absent-mindedly kept looking toward the entrance of the banquet hall, hoping to see that person, yet she never appeared. Just as Albert was about to call Lillian, a commotion broke out among the guests. People pointed at the large screen, whispering among themselves. Olivia covered her face and looked at the scene with apparent grief. After comforting Olivia, Albert tried to call Lillian, wanting to ask whether this was her doing, but he couldn't get through. Beep. Irritated, Albert tossed his phone aside, failing to notice the screen lighting up. At the Wu family's old residence, Lillian shut all the doors and windows, turned on the gas, and stepped outside the old house. She watched as the firefighters placed the body of the executed criminal in position, then struck a match. The roaring flames behind her illuminated the police badge on Lillian's chest, making it gleam brilliantly. A gentle breeze brushed across her cheek, as if a mother were seeing her child off. Police badge 024869 reactivated. Chapter 9. During a break in the ceremony, Albert wore a dark expression as he instructed his secretary to investigate how Lillian's diary had ended up being displayed on the big screen. The people he had sent to the old residence reported no news at all. This only deepened Albert's suspicion of Lillian. What was she trying to do? Disappear on purpose to attract his attention? A cold sneer surfaced on Albert's face, his eyes brimming with anger. Though upon closer inspection, there was also a trace of worry mixed in. Olivia, hiding nearby, caught this subtle change in his expression. She hurried over, feigning anxiety and concern. Albert, is there still no news about Lily? Albert lifted his phone, then put it back down again, holding Olivia's hand reassuringly. He said, "Don't worry, she wouldn't dare go far. She's probably hiding somewhere right now, secretly watching us." Hearing this, Olivia visibly relaxed. "That's good. I was really afraid Lily might do something irrational." Olivia subtly guided Albert into linking the diary incident to Lillian. Albert clearly took her words to heart and fell into thought. Just as Albert was pondering, the MC's voice rang out. "Now, let us welcome Mr. Rodriguez and Miss Olivia to the stage." Albert snapped back to his senses, a gentle smile appearing on his face. He extended a hand like a gentleman, and Olivia smiled as she placed her hand in his. The two walked together toward the center of the banquet hall. Just as they were about to exchange engagement rings, Olivia suddenly clutched her head and crouched down, with terror in her eyes. Olivia stared into midair. A figure whose face could not be seen, nor whose gender could be discerned, forcefully stripped the system from her body. It crushed the system in its grasp. The system didn't even manage to say a single word before dissipating into nothingness. Then the figure slowly lowered its head. A pair of calm, emotionless eyes looked straight at Olivia as it spoke a few words slowly, words that made Olivia scream uncontrollably. "No!" After that, Olivia's smooth, fair skin gradually dulled, and her once sparkling eyes seemed to be covered by a hazy filter. If the Olivia from moments ago had been a pure, innocent white lotus, then the Olivia now was nothing more than a girl next door, someone who would completely blend into the crowd. Utterly unremarkable. Albert's gaze suddenly cleared as well. There was no longer even a trace of love for Olivia in his eyes. Yet Olivia noticed none of this. Her mind was consumed by terror, replaying over and over the words spoken by that being, something that could no longer even be called human. "From this moment on, everything the system granted you will disappear." The main god, unable to bear seeing the female lead it had once chosen in such a state, offered Olivia a final reminder. "From here on, everything depends on your own efforts. Forget the identity bestowed upon you by the system, and start over." Albert quietly observed Olivia, unable to understand why he had been so obsessed with her recently. She now looked like nothing more than an ordinary person. Seeing Olivia remain unresponsive, Albert calmly arranged for the guests to be escorted out. Those who had hoped to watch the spectacle didn't dare defy Albert and left reluctantly. In the blink of an eye, Olivia had already fainted. Albert rubbed his temples, sent Olivia to the Rodriguez family's private hospital, and ordered a full-body examination for her. Albert wanted to find out what exactly was different about this Olivia. While he was waiting at the hospital for the results, Secretary Torres appeared before him, looking panicked. "President Rodriguez, and no, something's wrong. Something has happened to Miss Olivia." The phone Albert had just taken out slipped from his hand and crashed to the floor. Losing all composure, he shouted at Secretary Torres. "What did you say?" Chapter 10. Seeing Albert like this, Secretary Torres felt a wave of fear. He had followed Albert ever since graduating, and in all these years, he had never seen him like this. Stammering, he explained to the man, "The people you sent to the old residence to look for Miss Olivia, the reason they never came back is because they were trapped there helping with the firefighting. And the fire, it was the old residence that caught fire." Albert staggered. Seeing this, Secretary Torres hurried forward to support him. Unsure whether he should continue speaking, Albert's vision went dark for a moment, his heart feeling as if it were about to leap out of his chest. He forced down the panic rising within him and grabbed Secretary Torres's arm tightly, demanding, "Then where is Olivia? Where was Olivia?" Secretary Torres avoided his gaze. Just as he was about to spill everything, a group of police officers approached from the far end of the hospital corridor. "Hello, are you Mr. Rodriguez?" After Albert Rodriguez nodded, the leading officer continued. "According to a report from the villa's security, a gas leak at the old residence caused a fire. After the firefighters extinguished it, they discovered a female body inside. After identification, it was confirmed to be your niece, Lillian. Please come to the police station to make the identification." A loud ringing filled Albert's ears. He could barely hear what the officer was saying. Helplessly, he looked towards Secretary Torres, hoping he would refute it, tell him this was all just actors Lillian had hired. But Secretary Torres lowered his head, not daring to look at him. At that moment, what was there left for Albert not to understand? He stumbled forward a few steps, wanting to expose the lie. Impossible, impossible. Just yesterday, Lillian had been standing right in front of him, perfectly fine. How could this be? With that thought, Albert lost consciousness. When Albert woke up again, all he could see was blinding white. In a panic, he threw off the covers, wanting to go see Lillian one last time, but a familiar figure stopped him. Albert looked up and froze. The person in front of him was Father Wu. The last shred of hope in Albert's heart vanished. Father Wu's return made everything unmistakably clear. Albert could no longer deceive himself into believing this was just a prank Lillian had staged with others. Brother, where is Lily? Is she still angry? Please let her come see me. I'll apologize to her in person. She can take whatever revenge she wants." This joke Olivia pulled went too far. You need to talk to her. She shouldn't joke about life and death like this. Father Wu silently watched Albert spiral out of control. Before returning to the country, he had already sent people to investigate how Lillian had lived all these years. He never imagined that the treasure he had held in the palm of his hand would be ruined to this extent. Thinking of the injuries Lillian had suffered recently, Father Wu's face darkened with fury. He slammed a folder hard into Albert's face. "I am not your brother. Albert, I truly regret ever entrusting Lily to your care." Trembling, Albert opened the folder. The first thing that met his eyes was a death notification. At the line for the name, Lillian's name was written clearly. Albert could no longer bear to look. The documents scattered across the floor, but Father Wu clearly had no intention of letting him off. "Mr. Rodriguez might as well take a look at what comes after," Father Wu said coldly. "After all, it's about the brilliant history of your so-called true love, Miss Olivia." Like a walking corpse, Albert bent down and picked up the papers. Reading them, the more he read, the more violently his hands trembled. In the end, Albert slapped himself hard across the face. Father Wu did not stop him. He only thought, this was nothing yet. Everything Albert had done to Lillian, he would make him repay it, without missing a single thing. As he was thinking this, Albert slowly stood up, brushed aside the secretary who tried to support him, and headed straight for the adjacent hospital room. Inside the room, Olivia was resting with her eyes closed, thinking about what she should do next. Suddenly sensing someone standing before her, she was about to scold them, who was so blind as to come provoke her now. But the moment she saw Albert, she instantly changed expression, putting on a tearful, pitiful look. "Albert, you're finally here." Albert stared at Olivia intensely and asked word by word, "Back then, who was it that actually saved me?" Chapter 11. The coquettish words Olivia was about to say caught in her throat. Panic flashed across her face in an instant. Did Albert discover something? Impossible, absolutely impossible. The system was gone. But that incident back then hadn't involved the system at all. She had already destroyed every piece of evidence. As for Lillian, Albert wouldn't believe anything she said now anyway. Thinking this, Olivia finally calmed down. It was me, Albert. Why are you asking this? Are you doubting me? Or did Lily say something? This trick had always worked for Olivia before, but she forgot that it only worked because Albert had loved her. Now, without the system's interference, Albert saw her as nothing more than a familiar stranger. He would no longer blindly believe her little tricks. Seeing Olivia stubbornly deny it, Albert could no longer suppress the violence boiling inside him. He reached out and grabbed her by the throat. I'll ask you one last time, was it really you? As the air in her lungs grew thinner and thinner, Olivia frantically clawed at Albert's arm, but the disparity in their strength made her resistance nothing more than an ant trying to shake a tree. Just when Olivia thought she was about to die, Albert suddenly released her. She clutched her neck, staring at him in terror, coughing violently, her body trembling with fear. Seeing Albert like this, there was no point in pretending anymore. It was better to tell the truth. Maybe Albert would spare her life. I'll talk. It wasn't me. It was Lillian. Lillian was the one who saved you. Albert heard the answer he wanted, yet his heart only hurt more. Then what had he been doing all these years? A year ago, Albert had been set up by a rival. His car had gone off a winding mountain road, killing the driver instantly and leaving Albert unconscious. When he woke up, the first person he saw was Olivia sitting by his hospital bed. She had smiled and accepted it, and he had assumed it was Olivia who saved him. Later, when Lillian told him she had been the one to save him, he accused her of being scheming, of trying to steal someone else's credit. Thinking of the information in the file, Albert's heart ached as if it were about to explode. Back then, when Lillian heard about his accident, she had gone alone to the bottom of the cliff despite everyone's attempts to stop her. After finding him, she had carried him on her back and trekked through the mountains for an entire day. It wasn't until she finally saw the rescue team that she collapsed from exhaustion. Yet at the time, Albert hadn't just been angry at Lillian for supposedly stealing credit. He had also resented her for not visiting him during his long hospital stay, not even checking on him once. Now that he thought about it, he realized how foolish and pitiful he had been. Lillian had stayed away precisely because she was afraid he would worry about her. Olivia's coughing dragged Albert back to the present. Looking at the woman before him, for the first time he felt no pity, only a detached, condescending gaze as he spoke coldly. Don't worry, I won't let you die easily. Hearing this, Olivia let out a sigh of relief. She knew it, Albert still had feelings for her. What she didn't know was that a few months later, she would be begging this very man to let her die. Chapter 12. Albert returned to his hospital room in a daze. The moment his eyes met Father Wu's gaze, he abruptly snapped back to his senses. Just as he was about to speak, Secretary Torres rushed in and cut him off. President Rodriguez, we've confirmed everything. Miss Olivia was not assaulted some time ago. She was actually in a relationship with a street thug. The child was his as well. We also discovered that the day before the miscarriage, Miss Olivia went to the hospital to obtain abortion pills. It's likely that she misjudged the dosage, which led to the massive hemorrhage. At this point, Secretary Torres cautiously glanced at Albert. Seeing that his expression was still relatively calm, he continued, additionally, we received news from the Bai family. They found that Olivia Bai bribed hospital staff to swap the DNA test reports of Miss Olivia and Miss Lisa. Olivia Bai is not the Lisa family's true daughter. The Lisa family is now preparing to hold her accountable. After Secretary Torres finished speaking, Father Wu gestured for the secretary behind him to continue. According to our investigation, Olivia has been involved with 5 different partners in total. 1 year ago, she was dating the young master of the Hu family. He didn't go on, but everyone present understood the implication. In South City, who didn't know that the Rodriguez group and the Hu group were sworn enemies? On this side, Albert had just been involved in an accident. On the other, Olivia, who had been dating the young master of the Hu family, appeared by Albert's side, deceived everyone, and claimed credit for saving him. Who was behind all this was obvious without saying. Following Father Wu's instructions, Olivia was brought in and made to listen to everything. She cried as she shook her head. No, that's not true. It must be Lillian framing me. These people must all have been bribed by Lillian. How could they know about these things? With tears blurring her vision, Olivia looked at Albert, hoping to find even a shred of pity. But the emotion in his eyes was nothing like what she expected. It was a hatred carved to the bone. "Olivia," Albert said coldly, "tell me, how does a dead person bribe the living? If my secretary hadn't investigated, I wouldn't even know you had such a past. Over all these years, how many words you said were actually true? And who gave you the nerve to lie to me like this? The Hua family." Olivia's face turned even paler than before. She crawled on her knees to Albert's feet. "Albert, the Hua family forced me. I didn't want to do it. Please. I'm begging you, spare me." Seeing that Albert remained unmoved, Olivia turned to Father Wu. The moment she entered, she had noticed him. This was a man who clearly wasn't simple. She tried to win his sympathy, but instead she kicked an even harder iron plate. "Sir, please save me. I'll do anything." Albert watched the scene with open mockery, saying nothing, only quietly observing Olivia's pitiful clown act. Father Wu spoke with mild interest. "Oh, anything?" Seeing a glimmer of hope, Olivia nodded frantically. But Father Wu's face darkened in an instant. "Then start by breaking both of your own arms." The joy that had just surfaced on Olivia's face froze immediately. What do you mean?" Then Albert's next sentence plunged her into complete despair. "Do you know who the person you're begging right now is?" Albert said flatly. "Lillian's father, Orson." Chapter 13. Olivia collapsed onto the ground, thinking of all the things she had done to Lillian out of jealousy. She finally understood. She was completely finished. Without giving Olivia any time to react, the men under Father Wu's command efficiently broke her arms and legs. Only after everything was done did Father Wu finally turn his gaze to Albert. He signaled for his men to restrain Albert, then took the barbed whip handed to him by a bodyguard. Whish! The whip lashed violently across Albert's body. Albert let out a muffled groan and shot a warning look at the secretary, who tried to rush forward, silently enduring Father Wu's fury. As the burning pain tore through his body, Albert was overwhelmed with regret. He didn't dare imagine what Lillian must have felt back then, that little girl who had been pampered and protected since childhood. Beaten by him to that extent. After venting the rage in his heart, Father Wu ordered the bodyguards to also break Albert's arms, then led his people away. Once Albert Rodriguez had his wounds treated, he went to the old residence. Staring at the ruined building, he couldn't stop himself from wanting to go inside, but he was stopped. "Mr. Rodriguez, the boss has instructed that you are not allowed to enter." Blocked at the entrance, Albert stood there blankly, staring at the old house, lost in thought. Soon, Secretary Torres hurried over. After whispering something into Albert's ear, the two of them left together. Seeing this, the bodyguards reported Albert's movements to Father Wu. Not long after, Albert appeared at the funeral that Father Wu had arranged for Lillian Wu. The old butler had been receiving guests. When he saw Albert, his expression immediately darkened. "You are not welcome here. Leave at once." Albert looked at the old butler pleadingly. "Uncle Lee, please, let me go in." The old butler's face was grim as he waved him away. "I can't bear that responsibility. Mr. Rodriguez, you should leave immediately. Don't soil the young lady's path to reincarnation." Hearing the commotion, the servants who had come to help also stepped forward. "How do you still have the face to come here? If you hadn't beaten the miss like that, would she have been burned alive?" Albert, who had been forcing himself to remain composed, slowly bent at the waist when he heard those words. Yes, it was all because of him, because of his distrust, because of his stupidity, that Lillian had been harmed. But he was unwilling to accept it. He wanted to see Lillian one last time. He signaled for Secretary Torres to block them while he tried to force his way in. At that moment, Father Wu emerged from the mourning hall, his face dark. Even though this was only a staged funeral, he still didn't want ill-omened people coming to disturb it. It seemed it was time to give Albert something to occupy himself with. Meanwhile, Olivia opened her eyes and realized she was in a hospital room. She thought someone had come to save her and finally relaxed, beginning to observe her surroundings, only to realize something was wrong. There were no windows, no furniture, only a small door barely large enough for one person to pass through. Her wounds hadn't been treated either. She couldn't move at all. She didn't know how much time passed before the tightly shut door finally opened. Olivia tried to speak in excitement, only to realize she couldn't make a sound. A nurse-like worker slowly injected something into Olivia's body. Olivia shook her head in terror. No. Albert looked at the report handed over by his secretary, President Rodriguez. Olivia's mental state has already shown signs of collapse. Albert looked at the photograph of Lillian on his desk, her smile radiant. He slowly nodded. Every time he looked at Lillian's photo, he would think of the days they had spent living together. Back then, they had clearly been happy. He had liked Lillian too, so much so that he had even planned to confess to her first. But ever since that woman appeared, it was as if he had been bewitched. He loved her to madness, even to the point of hurting the woman he loved most. Why had it turned out like this? Albert didn't know, but he did know that all the harm Lillian had suffered stemmed from Olivia, and from himself. They both deserved to atone. Chapter 14. After tormenting Olivia once again, Albert stood at the entrance of the sanatorium and lit a cigarette, waiting for his secretary to pick him up. Just as Albert heard the sound of a car and looked up, a vehicle with no license plate slammed straight into him. In the second before he closed his eyes, Albert smiled in relief. He could finally see Lillian again. He wondered if she would forgive him. With nervousness and anticipation tangled together, Albert closed his eyes in a pool of blood. Already back overseas, Father Wu received the call. After a moment of thought, he instructed calmly, "Send people to save him. Don't let him die so easily. After all, living is more painful than dying, isn't it?" And so, after a full day of emergency treatment, Albert was barely saved, but he remained in a coma, never waking up. 2 years later, Nanchur Hospital, supported by others, Albert walked step by step inside the rehabilitation room, slowly rebuilding the strength in his legs. Ever since the car accident 2 years ago, Albert had been trapped in a dream. Over those 2 years, he had witnessed, like an outsider, another ending between himself and Lillian. In the dream, they did get married, but he treated Lillian terribly. After learning that she was pregnant, he grew disgusted and never went to see her again. Lillian gradually became silent and withdrawn, eventually developing severe depression. Later, she even showed signs of self-harm. Albert, existing as a soul in the dream, spun in panic beside her. He desperately tried to stop her, but every time his hands passed straight through Lillian's body. In the end, Albert completely broke down, his vision going black. When he woke again in the dream, Lillian had improved and was able to live normally. Just as Albert finally felt relieved, Lillian was drugged by him and taken to the hospital. And there, he saw the person he hated most, Olivia. In the dream, he was just like his former self, obsessively in love with Olivia, willing to do anything for her. But even a beast would not devour its own offspring. Yet the dream version of him actually listened to a single sentence from Olivia and forcibly cut their child out of Lillian, completely disregarding her life or death. After watching Lillian die on the operating table with his own eyes, Albert went to Olivia's hospital room, intending to perish together with her. But the moment he entered, he overheard a conversation between Olivia and an electronic voice. "System, the female lead is already dead, and the male lead has been successfully conquered. My mission is complete now, right? Can I return to my original world?" Through Olivia's conversation with the so-called system, Albert finally understood everything. Why every time he saw Olivia, it felt as if he had been bewitched. It turned out that all of it was the system's doing. He and Lillian were originally the true male and female leads of this world. Without their interference, they would have followed Albert's true wishes, married, and lived happily ever after. But all of it had been destroyed by them. Albert erupted with an unprecedented surge of power. At the moment the system attempted to send Olivia back, he dragged them down with him, choosing mutual destruction. And so, Albert finally woke up, but his legs had been shattered in the car accident. Combined with lying unconscious for 2 years, he had completely lost his ability to walk and could only rely on rehabilitation training to regain some mobility. Inside the bustling room, Albert stared intently at his feet, as if nothing around him could disturb his focus. It wasn't until he sat down to rest and lifted his head that he caught sight of a familiar figure. Albert didn't see that person's face, he only glimpsed a fleeting silhouette from behind. Yet in that single instant, his lifeless heart began to pound violently. Albert used every ounce of strength he had to stand. He lifted his foot, trying to chase after that figure, but collapsed miserably to the ground. Staring at the retreating silhouette, Albert suddenly spat out a mouthful of blood. Chapter 15. When Albert woke up again, it was already night. The moment he opened his eyes, he wanted to get out of bed to look for the person whose silhouette resembled Lillian's so closely. But he was too anxious and fell straight off the hospital bed. Hearing the noise, Secretary Torres hurried over and helped Albert into a wheelchair. President Rodriguez, are you all right? For the past 2 years, the Rodriguez group had been barely held together by him and another partner. Now that Albert had finally awakened, he didn't want anything else to happen to him. Albert didn't answer Torres's question. He maneuvered the wheelchair straight toward the exit. Seeing this, Torres hurried after him. President Rodriguez, President Rodriguez, where are you going? Wait for me. By the time Secretary Torres finally caught up, Albert had already found the person he had been longing for day and night. It really was her. Lillian hadn't died after all. Looking at Lillian's face, unchanged in the slightest, Albert wanted to rush forward and ask where she had gone all these years. Ask whether she had been living well. But then he saw that Lillian, who had been standing alone just moments ago, was now smiling warmly as she spoke with someone else. That man was someone Albert also recognized, the only son of the Cruz family from a city. Elias Cruz. Albert looked down at his broken body and thought of his unrecognizable reflection in the mirror. For a moment, he didn't dare step forward. In an instant, the joy of finding her again turned into fear and anxiety. He was afraid Lillian would see him like this, afraid to find out what relationship Lillian had with Elias, even more afraid that Lillian would never forgive him. But watching Lillian about to leave together with Elias, Albert could no longer hold back. From the corner, he maneuvered his wheelchair over to her. Lillian! His whole body trembled as he called out that familiar yet unfamiliar name, his eyes instantly reddening. It was okay. As long as Lillian was still alive, he had a chance to make amends. He didn't believe that after so many years of feelings between him and Lillian, she truly wouldn't forgive him. Over these years, both he and Olivia had paid the price. Even if Lillian still wasn't satisfied, he was willing to do anything, as long as she was happy. But Lillian could fake her death out of anger. She could punish him for all his mistakes over the years. She just couldn't be with someone else. She could only be his. He blocked Lillian's path, tilting his head up to stare at the face he no longer dared to recall. Lily, is it really you? Lily? This scene, one he had imagined countless times in his dreams, felt unreal now that it was happening for Real. He asked cautiously, again and again, as if confirming that what he was seeing wasn't an illusion. The smile on Lillian's face vanished instantly. Sir, please move aside. You're blocking the way. Albert froze. That single, merciless sentence completely shattered the fantasy he had clung to, piercing his heart until he could barely breathe. This wasn't how it was supposed to be. It couldn't be this reaction. She could hit him, curse him, he wouldn't feel sad at all. But in Lillian's tone, there was no love, and no hatred either. Then what was he to her now? Lily, hit me, Albert said. As he spoke, he grabbed Lillian's hand and tried to slap his own face with it, hoping to draw her attention this way. Lillian impatiently shook free from his grasp and looked at the man she had once loved so deeply with nothing but disgust. Even though Lillian knew that many of the things Albert had done back then were influenced by the system, when she thought of the child she had lost in her previous life, and her own death, she knew she could never love him again. At first, there had been hatred, but after learning about the system bound to Olivia, and after 2 years of experience and growth, even that last trace of hatred toward Albert had faded away. Now, when she looked at Albert, it was as if she were looking at a familiar stranger. No love, no hatred, only distance. Why would I hit you, Mr. Rodriguez? Albert Rodriguez spoke incoherently. I was deceived by Olivia. I did so many things that hurt you. Before he could finish, Lillian cut him off. If a dog bites me, she said calmly, do I have to bite it back? Chapter 16. Do you really not love me anymore? I don't believe it. If you didn't love me, why did you carry me out of the mountains on your back, step by step? If you didn't love me, why did you confess to me? If you didn't love me, why did you endure all the harm I inflicted on you? Lillian listened to Albert's hysterical interrogation with a blank expression. At that moment, she finally understood why. In her previous life, Albert had refused to come see her again. It was truly undignified and unbearably irritating. Elias noticed the impatience on Lillian's face. He stepped forward, unobtrusively positioning himself in front of her, and spoke politely. Mr. Rodriguez, it seems your assistant has been waiting for you for quite a while. Perhaps you should head back first. Seeing the man blocking Lillian, Albert completely lost control of his emotions. Using the wheelchair for support, he barely managed to stand and grabbed Elias by the collar. Get lost! Move! What does this have to do with you? This is between Lily and me. Elias's polite expression instantly turned cold. He reassured Lillian behind him, then unhurriedly pried Albert's hand off his collar. Mr. Rodriguez, I've long heard about your affairs with Miss Olivia. Everyone in this circle knows what you did for her, repaying kindness with cruelty, abusing the daughter of your benefactor, going blind and deaf to believe a pretentious coquette's slander. Each and every one of those things, weren't they all done by you? And now you still have the nerve to come see Lily? Sometimes I really admire people like you with skin this thick. Someone like you would succeed at anything, after all. Once your face is thick enough, nothing can pierce it. Don't you think so? Lillian looked at Elias in surprise. They had known each other for a while now, and Elias had always appeared gentle, refined, and good-tempered in front of her, occasionally revealing a hint of slyness. This was the first time she had seen this side of him, sharp-tongued, sarcastic, and effortlessly infuriating. Oddly enough, it was kind of cute. Elias had been about to keep provoking Albert, but the moment he noticed Lillian's gaze, his mind went blank. Oh no, the image he had worked so hard to maintain seemed to be cracking. At that point, Elias decided to go all in. Since Wu's father had already told him everything about what had happened between Lillian and Albert, there was nothing left to hold back. When Elias heard it all back then, he had only one thought: heartache. Heartache that his fiancée had once been treated like that. Mr. Rodriguez, why are you still standing here? Has the Rodriguez group gone bankrupt, leaving you this idle? Seeing things escalating, Lillian quickly tugged at Elias's sleeve. Mr. Rodriguez, didn't you hear what my fiancé said? It seems that car accident 2 years ago was quite serious. Not only did it cripple your legs, it damaged your ears as well. You can't even understand human speech anymore. Albert didn't register the latter part of her words at all. His mind was entirely stuck on how she had addressed Elias just now. Fiancé. Elias had become her fiancé. Albert forced a strained smile. Lily, are you joking with me? Elias is just your friend, right? Not your fiancé, right? Seeing Albert still rambling on, Lillian truly lost her patience. What was wrong with this man? He hadn't been this talkative or tiresome before. She suddenly remembered what the housekeeper had told her before she went out. Miss, we made your favorite braised prawns and spicy chicken tonight. Remember to come back early. After years of carrying out missions abroad, Lillian hadn't eaten such home-style dishes in a long time. Just thinking about them made her anxious, and she certainly had no patience left for Albert. Albert, just how thick-skinned do you have to be? What about you is worth me lying to? The declining Rodriguez group? Or you, crippled like this? With that, Lillian grabbed Elias's hand and walked away. Elias glanced thoughtfully at the hand she was holding. Before Lillian could react, he interlaced their fingers, satisfied. Elias looked at their intertwined hands and strode after Lillian. Albert watched their retreating figures. He covered his face as he broke down completely. After a while, however, he slowly regained his usual cold composure. He raised a hand and summoned Secretary Torres, who had been hiding nearby. Go check whether this marriage alliance is real, Albert said flatly. Secretary Torres nearly collapsed inwardly as he agreed. Judging by how intimate Lillian and Elias were, how could it possibly be fake? Was there really any need to investigate? But seeing Albert's obsessive expression, Torres didn't dare argue and could only comply in silence. He never expected that before he could even begin the investigation, Albert Rodriguez would be forced to face reality head-on. Chapter 17. Inside the Rodriguez Group's office, Albert stared at the invitation that had been placed on his desk, momentarily frozen. So Lillian hadn't lied to make him jealous after all. She and Elias were actually real. Thinking about the results Secretary Torres had uncovered regarding Lillian's whereabouts over the past few years, Albert felt a chill run through him. Her trail was completely blank, clean to the point where it looked as if Lillian had truly died. The only information Torres managed to find was from recently. 2 weeks ago, Lillian had taken up a position at the Police University of Country A as a professor. This news had caused quite a stir among law enforcement students. After all, there had never been someone as young as Lillian appointed as a professor. And she wasn't teaching some filler elective either, but a core course, genuinely imparting real knowledge. Meanwhile, the very person Albert was thinking about suddenly sneezed herself awake. Lillian jolted upright in bed, only to relax again and lie back down once she took in her surroundings. During the 2 years she spent carrying out missions, Lillian hadn't had a single day of proper rest. She constantly had to stay alert for criminals testing her or making sudden moves. So when she finally returned, she slept heavily for 2 full days. It scared Father Wu so badly that he almost sent her to the hospital. Thankfully, the family doctor arrived in time. Miss is simply overexhausted and has fallen into deep sleep. The doctor explained, once her body recovers its basic functions, she'll naturally wake up. There's no need to worry too much. The doctor then administered a nutrient infusion and casually added, "This is actually the first time I've seen this kind of condition in a wealthy household. Back when I worked in public hospitals, though, migrant workers often ended up like this." Hearing that, Father Wu looked at Lillian lying on the bed with deep heartache. He had always known what his daughter would go through, but hearing it put this way still made his chest ache. From the moment Lillian decided to carry out the mission, Father Wu had already negotiated cooperation with Country A. The organization he had built overseas would relay all gathered intelligence and movements directly to Country A, doing everything possible to ensure Lillian's operation went smoothly. Even so, Lillian had still endured immense hardship to complete the mission. Thinking of the injuries on Lillian's body that hadn't fully healed when she returned, Father Wu's eyes reddened. This time, no matter what, he would not let Lillian return to the front lines. So after Lillian woke up, Father Wu made his stance clear to her. Seeing the gray hairs at her father's temples, Lillian agreed. Her wish had already been fulfilled. She had helped her mother complete the mission she never got to finish. She was already content. Moreover, her body was no longer suitable for missions of that kind. The higher-ups had already subtly advised her to step down from frontline work. Since Father Wu was saying the same, Lillian simply accepted it. It was better for everyone. Seeing Lillian agree so readily, Father Wu finally let out a sigh of relief. He knew how stubborn she could be. Her easy acceptance surprised him. But as long as the outcome was good, that was enough. "Then what do you plan to do from now on?" he asked. As he was speaking, the director of the Nanshur Public Security Bureau called, "Lillian, do you have time to come by the bureau?" Lillian naturally agreed. After all, the arrangements would still need to be discussed with the bureau. After their discussion, Lillian was assigned to her alma mater as a teacher, an arrangement she was quite satisfied with. Once Lillian had settled in, Father Wu called her into the study. "Lily, you're not getting any younger now. Things have stabilized. Don't you think it's time to start thinking about your lifelong happiness?" Seeing Lillian about to refuse, Father Wu quickly played the emotional card. "Sweetheart, you're all I have now. My biggest wish is to see you get married and have children. Otherwise, when I die one day, how will I face your mother?" Looking at her father, whose acting was painfully obvious, Lillian felt helpless. "All right, Dad, I agree. Is that good enough?" Having lived 2 lifetimes, what Lillian cherished most now was family. She couldn't bear to see Father Wu worrying about her at his age, thinking she could just explain things clearly to that person later. She agreed. Yet as she looked at the man before her, Lillian found that she was oddly reluctant to refuse him. Chapter 18. "Miss Lillian, is there anything else you'd like to know?" Lillian shook her head. In fact, Father Wu had already told her everything about Elias back at home. Coming here today was merely a formality. Seeing that Lillian showed no discomfort, Elias finally relaxed. He smiled and asked gently, "Then, Lily, may I call you that?" Lillian nodded. Many people around her called her that already. One more made no difference. "All right, Lily, let's go somewhere else for a walk." After getting Lillian's consent, Elias took her to a private beach. When the two stopped by the shore, the distant sky suddenly lit up. Brilliant fireworks bloomed one after another. Lillian looked on in surprise as words gradually appeared in the sky. "Be happy every day." After that, there was even a little pear drawn beneath the words. Lillian turned to look at Elias. Meeting her gaze, Elias said softly, I hope you're happy every single day. Lillian. Lillian's heart skipped a beat. The words she had prepared suddenly felt hard to say. Aside from Father Wu, Elias was the first person to offer her such a sincere wish. Be happy every day. Simple, but earnest. Lillian looked Elias straight in the eyes and said seriously, Elias, I wish you happiness every day too. When they got home, Father Wu subtly asked Lillian what she thought of Elias. After thinking for a moment, Lillian replied, he's a very good person. Seeing that Lillian was receptive, both families happily began preparing for the engagement. Ever since that encounter with Albert at the hospital, Elias had completely dropped his polite facade. He became clingy and loved acting cute. Unable to withstand Elias's constant coaxing, Lillian finally agreed to let him send an invitation to Albert. Originally, she had planned to treat Albert as a complete stranger and never have any further contact with him. But since Elias insisted on inviting him, then so be it. Lillian thought she had already made things very clear to Albert that day. Yet when she saw Albert standing quietly outside her classroom, she couldn't help but feel a headache coming on. 3 days. She hadn't wanted to acknowledge him, but seeing the students whispering among themselves, Lillian hurriedly dismissed the class and took Albert to a secluded spot. She got straight to the point. What exactly do you want? You're already seriously affecting my work. If you're still like this tomorrow, don't blame me for calling security to throw you out. Albert hurriedly explained. Lily, I just want to make it up to you. Lillian gave a cold laugh. Looking at the gaunt Albert before her, she forced herself to stay calm. There's no need. There's really no need. Albert, it's already too late. Albert anxiously grabbed her wrist, unconsciously tightening his grip. Lily, please give me a chance to make amends, all right? I had my reasons for treating you the way I did before. I can explain everything slowly. Don't get engaged to Elias. He's older than you. That's why he's in such a hurry. You've only known each other for such a short time. Yet he's already rushing into an engagement. He must have some ulterior motive. Lillian frowned and pulled her hand free. Albert didn't notice her discomfort at all and continued explaining stubbornly. The last shred of patience Lillian had for Albert was completely used up. She cut him off without any politeness. If I don't get engaged to Elias, then who? You. Elias is only 3 years older than me. You're 8 years older than me. Uncle. Albert's face turned pale as he tried to speak. But Lillian continued. Albert, sometimes I really don't understand what love means to you. You said you loved Olivia, yet you made her give up her career and revolve around you. Now you say you love me, but you don't pay the slightest attention to my feelings. You hurt me just now and didn't even notice my reaction. And now, despite my objections, you insist on coming here and interfering with my work. Albert, your love is cheap, and it's disgusting. Chapter 19. After parting on bad terms with Albert that day, Lillian didn't see him again for a long time. At first, Lillian thought her words had simply been too harsh and had hurt Albert's pride. It wasn't until Father Wu told her the truth that she realized what had happened. Elias had deliberately found something to keep Albert busy. Only then did Lillian have an epiphany. Looking at the date invitation Elias had sent her, a mischievous thought suddenly crossed her mind. At the entrance of the villa, Elias got out of the car, opened the door, and shielded Lillian as he escorted her inside. After Lillian sat down, she casually remarked as if unintentionally, I don't know what's been going on lately, but Albert hasn't come to bother me at all. After saying that, she carefully observed Elias's expression, seeing his slightly raised eyebrows and the clearly lifted corners of his mouth compared to just now. She found it rather amusing. Why do you look a little happy? She asked. Did something good happen? Elias's body stiffened for a split second. He cleared his throat guiltily. Can't I be happy about going on a date with Lily? Lillian let out a long "oh." From her reaction, Elias knew, she definitely already knew what he had done. Elias had run into Albert several times when picking Lillian up from work. He felt that Albert was far too idle, so he decided to give him something to do. He had his subsidiary companies snatch several contracts away from the Rodriguez Group. The Rodriguez Group's cash flow had already been in trouble, and those projects had basically been the result of all their remaining efforts. Now that Elias's family had taken them, Albert was forced to focus on handling company affairs and no longer had the time to go bother Lillian. Elias was very satisfied with this outcome. Soon, the day of Lillian and Elias's engagement arrived. All the major media outlets in South City were invited to attend the engagement ceremony. Albert abandoned company matters and came to the entrance of the engagement hotel as well. He hesitated, not quite daring to go inside. He was afraid of seeing Lillian being intimate with someone else. Yet he was unwilling to simply give up. He wanted to explain everything to Lillian, to tell her that back then, he truly hadn't been able to help himself. In the end, Albert bribed an attendant and made his way into Lillian's dressing room. Lillian had just finished changing into her gown. When Albert saw her, a flash of amazement crossed his eyes. His little girl had grown up. She was no longer the child who had followed behind him everywhere. Uncertainty suddenly filled Albert's heart. Even if he explained everything, would Lillian really fall back in love with him, just as he hoped? Albert didn't dare to think about it, and didn't want to. He had no retreat left. No other choice. "Lily, can we talk alone for a bit? Just for a moment." Lillian thought about it, then nodded in agreement. Seeing this, Albert hurriedly began to explain. "Lily, everything I'm about to say is true. I'm absolutely not making this up. Please believe me. I did like you. Lily, I was already prepared to confess to you, but then Olivia appeared. I couldn't control myself and fell in love with her. During that time, my will was influenced by the system attached to Olivia. I was manipulated into doing many things that hurt you, but none of that was what I truly wanted." Seeing that Lillian's expression didn't change at all, Albert anxiously tried to continue speaking, but suddenly, a thought flashed through his mind. Lillian's change before and after was far too obvious. Could it be that? Albert's voice turned hoarse. "Lily, did you also experience that lifetime?" Lillian's expression shifted slightly. She hadn't expected Albert to awaken. He not only knew about Olivia and the system, but even about the previous life. At that point, Lillian no longer hid the truth. "Yes, I was reborn from my previous life," she said calmly. "Since you already know about that life, then don't come bother me again. I don't want to see you anymore." Watching Lillian turn around and leave without hesitation, Albert finally couldn't hold it in anymore. He covered his face and broke down in tears. So that was how it was. Thinking of Lillian's ending in her previous life, Albert finally understood why she was so cold and ruthless toward him. This was all his retribution. Chapter 20. At a psychiatric hospital in South City, Olivia took advantage of a moment when the security guard dozed off and escaped. Wandering aimlessly through the streets, Olivia's gaze was caught by a video playing on a giant screen. In it, Lillian, dressed in an elegant, expensive gown, walked forward with a radiant smile toward a man who looked almost godlike. The two appeared like a perfect, heavenly couple. Nearby, young women watching couldn't help but sigh in admiration. They look so well matched. She's beautiful like a fairy, and he's such a rare catch. Olivia stared at Lillian on the screen, her thoughts twisting into something ugly. Wasn't Lillian supposed to be dead? What was going on now? And she had even found a man better than Albert. Why? Why was it that she herself had barely survived all these years by pretending to be insane, while Lillian lived so happily? No, that couldn't be allowed. A mad idea began to take shape in Olivia's mind. She stalked Lillian for many days and discovered that Lillian's routine was simple: home and school, back and forth, with the occasional date with Elias. The more Olivia watched, the deeper her hatred grew. She could have lived such a life too. It was Lillian who ruined everything. Lillian had destroyed her life. All right, class dismissed. If anyone has questions, you can come ask me. After answering a few students' questions, Lillian noticed a student lingering hesitantly at the back of the classroom. She took the initiative to walk over. "Is something wrong?" she asked gently. "Do you need help with something?" The student hesitated, then finally spoke. "It should be fine. Teacher Lillian is so capable." "Teacher, could you come with me to a place?" Lillian glanced at the unfamiliar face, slipped her hand into her pocket, and sent a message to her emergency contact. Then she followed him, pretending to be concerned. When they reached a back gate of the campus, the student suddenly turned and ran. Lillian scanned her surroundings and saw a familiar figure. Before she could speak, dizziness hit her hard. Not good, there's knockout incense on that person. When Lillian woke up again, she was already on a cliff by the sea. She tried to shift her body to assess the surroundings, but the moment she moved, sharp pain flared across her face. Under normal circumstances, This wouldn't have been much to Lillian, but after a period of comfortable living, her fair, delicate cheeks quickly swelled. A flash of satisfaction crossed Olivia's eyes. Still unsatisfied, she slapped Lillian several more times, only stopping once Lillian's face was visibly swollen. "Do you remember me, Lillian?" Lillian spat out a mouthful of bloody saliva and replied calmly, "Long time no see." "Olivia, how did you end up looking like this? Got tired of being a pretentious coquette and decided to switch species into a ghost?" As Lillian deliberately provoked Olivia, she quietly worked on loosening the ropes behind her back. Just as she was about to free herself, the sound of a wheelchair rolling rapidly approached. "Stop. Olivia! Let Lillian go. If you want revenge, come at me." Olivia, who had been shouting curses just moments ago, suddenly froze. She looked at Albert with a dark, heavy gaze. "You finally came." Now that both of her enemies were here, Olivia was in an excellent mood. She failed to notice that Lillian had nearly freed herself. Taking advantage of Olivia's attention being on Albert, Lillian carefully stood up from the rocks. Having been unconscious for too long, her legs went numb and she nearly lost her balance. Albert couldn't help but cry out, "Lily, watch out!" Lillian barely steadied herself. Hearing Albert's voice, she cursed inwardly. Idiot. If it weren't for Albert, she would have already escaped. As long as she got away from this place, Olivia wouldn't stand a chance against her. Albert clearly realized this too. He cursed himself silently. Seeing Olivia move toward Lillian, he forced himself upright with all his strength and grabbed Olivia. Olivia instinctively struggled. The two of them tumbled together toward the edge of another rocky outcrop. Below it, the sea yawned deep and endless. Looking down at the police gathered below, Olivia suddenly burst into wild laughter. "Ha ha 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 ha. I'm the female lead. How could I possibly die? You'll never catch me." Chapter 21. As her words fell, Olivia dragged Albert down with her toward the sea. Before falling, Albert took one last deep look at Lillian, as if engraving her image into his very soul. Instinctively, Lillian lunged forward, trying to grab hold of them. They had committed crimes. There should have been legal consequences. It shouldn't have ended like this. Elias rushed over and pulled Lillian back, shaking his head at her and gesturing for her to look below. Seeing the rescue personnel already in position beneath the cliff, Lillian finally relaxed. At the hospital, the doctor came out of the emergency room and shook his head. The patient had suffered prolonged abuse before this, and their physical condition was already extremely poor after such a severe impact. There was massive internal bleeding. We couldn't save her. Hearing the outcome, Lillian didn't know how she was supposed to feel. Albert had already lost all signs of life at the scene. Now Olivia was gone as well. The two people who had hurt her most in her previous life had met such an end. For a moment, Lillian didn't even know whether she should feel relieved. Still, life had to go on. Gradually, Lillian let go of them. Let go of the pain they had caused her, just as Elias wished. Lillian now lived each day happily. After long discussions between both families, Lillian and Elias's wedding date was finally set. Standing below the stage, Lillian gripped Father Wu's hand tightly, tears shimmering in her eyes. Just as they were about to step onto the stage, a long unheard voice echoed in Lillian's mind. "Happy wedding day. 007? Why are you back?" The system coughed awkwardly and hurriedly changed the subject. "Host, I brought you a wedding gift. I can grant you any one wish." "A wish?" Lillian was already content with her life. There was nothing she lacked. Both families cherished her like a priceless treasure. But her eyes lit up with a fragile hope. "Can my child from my previous life return to me again?" The system let out a relieved breath. That was an easy one. Back when the system had left last time, Lillian had already told it about her rebirth, so it wasn't surprised at all. "Goodbye, host. And there's one more surprise waiting for you." Lillian was confused until, during the vows, she accidentally spotted someone in the audience who should never have been there. Albert. Only then did Lillian finally understand why the system had come back. It seemed Albert had made a deal with the system, but that had nothing to do with her anymore. Right now, all she wanted was to look at the man standing before her. Elias bowed his head devoutly and kissed the girl in front of him. His hands trembled with emotion. From the very first time he had seen her, he had imagined this moment, and now it had finally come true. Watching the woman he loved get married with his own eyes, Albert silently spoke a single sentence in his heart before his figure faded into the world. He had traded his chance at reincarnation with the system for one final opportunity to see Lillian again. The system, however, had been a little mischievous, choosing this moment of all times. Still, being able to see Lillian in her wedding dress was more than enough for Albert. Goodbye, Lillian,